Hey everybody, Chris here on Varsity Gaming, and welcome to another episode of Siege School. This is the 25th episode overall, and it has been quite a while since the last one. I think it's been over 4 months. Today's episode will be the first half of essentially a two-part series. We are going to be covering the secondary gadgets of attackers in this episode. So in the second part, we'll obviously go over the secondary gadgets of defenders, but today we're only going to talk about the attackers. Now overall, attackers have 5 different secondary gadgets that they are able to choose from. This includes claymores, breaching charges, smoke grenades, flash grenades, and frag grenades. Each of these serve various purposes and have different levels of utility, some of them being more highly sought after, while others are very rarely used. And we're going to cover each of these gadgets in depth. So there's going to be content in this episode for both the new players and the veteran players. The structure for each segment is going to go a basic description of a device and how it works, going over who has access to this gadget, and then who I personally equip it on, and then after that we'll go into advanced interactions and uses. And at the end of this show, like usual, we're going to have a quiz. And the quiz for this episode will have, for the most part, more advanced topics. And these questions contain information that I genuinely did not know about until I recorded this Siege School episode. So get excited for that. But first, let's get into the information segment of this video. The first gadget we're going to talk about today is claymores. Claymores are an explosive trap that attackers have access to. Each attacker that has access to it only gets one, and it can be placed on any flat surface, as long as there's room. The claymore has 3 lasers pointing out in front of it, one directly in front, and then 2 others pointed about 30 degrees from the middle one. Once the claymore is placed, it takes about a second and a half for the lasers to activate and for the claymore to actually come online. If any defender walks past this claymore and trips any of the lasers, the claymore will detonate almost immediately. Now we've covered the basics, let's go into who has access to the claymore. The claymore is available on 10 different operators: Thatcher, Thermite, Twitch, Glaz, IQ, Capitao, Ying, Zofia, Lion, and Maverick. Now I personally only run the claymore on Thatcher, Twitch, IQ, Ying, and Zofia. And the main reason why I run claymore on all 5 of these operators is because their only other option is a breaching charge, which I'll get more into later. But these are the 5 that I run claymore on. Now let's get into a bit of more advanced information on it. The claymore does damage in kind of a weird structure, which I did not know about until recording this episode. Originally, I believed that the claymore only did damage directly in front of it in a 180-degree range, but apparently I was wrong. The claymore does full blast damage in a full 360 circle around the claymore within 1 meter, but then past 2 meters it only does damage in front of it, not behind it. So it is possible to blow yourself up with a claymore if you're standing right behind it, but if you take just 1 step back, you'll be outside of its lethal range. So make sure not to put any claymores down too close to you. And for the most part, the claymore will do lethal damage. When you're standing right next to the claymore when it detonates, it does about 112 damage if you're a 3 armor operator. And when you're at its farthest range, at the end of the red lasers, it does about 104 damage. Past the 3-meter long lasers, the damage is 0. I wanted to test these values for 1 armor and 2 armor operators, but unfortunately I don't have enough computers to do that. But overall, these numbers show that if you are a 1 or 2 armor operator without rook armor, you are guaranteed going to die to a claymore. However, if you're a 3 armor operator, you'll get downed but not out if you have full health. And then if you have rook armor, you'll just always get downed but not out. Overall, I would say that claymores are unfortunately one of the least effective secondary gadgets available to attackers. That's not to say they're completely useless, because they do have their place, but it's very hard to get away with it, especially in the higher levels of play. Because of how easily destructible claymores are, and also how much of a telltale sign they have with the 3 bright red lasers sticking out, it's fairly easy for people to avoid them. Because of this, they only really have one good use, and it's generally at the top of staircases or ladders. This is to take advantage of the fact that a lot of people will push up staircases either aim down sight looking at the top and not looking for lasers, or they'll just sprint right up trying to get back to sight or run away or whatever. But in order to do it effectively, you want to set up the claymore in a specific way. And it only really works on staircases that have kind of a half wall / handrail on the side. You want to place the claymore fairly close to the half wall, and you only want to have one laser sticking out. All it takes is just one laser trip to activate the claymore, so even though the other two are blocked, the claymore will still set off when a defender runs up the staircase and triggers it. And when you hide the other two lasers, it makes it even harder for the defender to see. And if they do manage to see it, it's very hard for them to get the angle on shooting it without tripping it themselves. So some cautious defenders might just run away and go a different way instead. And like I said, most people won't slowly push up a staircase and check for claymore, they'll generally just push straight up. This works even better on ladders because if you set it up properly, the defender won't even be able to react to the claymore being there. In order to check for a claymore on a ladder, you have to go fairly slow at the top and make sure you don't accidentally go too far. Because if you go too far and start the animation for climbing to the top of a ladder, there's no way to cancel it. So if the claymore is set up properly, as soon as that animation starts, they're dead. Unfortunately, there aren't too many ladders across Siege, so it's kind of hard to pull this one off. You're better off with a staircase. The only other additional piece of information I can give you for claymores that's a little more advanced is having claymore set up through walls. One thing that I love doing is setting up a claymore through a soft wall, watching my flank. One of the most common places I do this is in the master bedroom of Oregon. When you're pushing in through there, you can punch a little hole in the wall next to the armory staircase and set up a claymore with the laser going through the wall. Now since that wall is soft, if a defender walks by and trips off that laser, it'll still kill them as it'll destroy the wall. This is a fairly powerful technique because the defenders can't see the claymore at all, they can only see the laser. And again, just like the staircase, if you set it up properly, they won't be able to see it until it's too late. But unfortunately, that's about it for my advanced information on it. And like I said, since claymores don't really work too well in the higher ranks of play, I tend to use them as more of a sound indicator than an actual trap. So what I do is I try to set up the claymore in a way that where I'm pushing from, I can still hear it. So if someone shoots it, I'll be able to tell that someone's about to flank me and I can turn around and get ready for them. However, if you stray too far away, obviously it's going to be really hard to hear it, and you're probably going to get flanked if you just assume your back is safe. So I guess that's one more tip I can add is never assume your back is safe even if you have a claymore there. But that's about it for the claymore section. The next gadget we're going to talk about is smoke grenades. Smoke grenades are a throwable that attackers can use to create a dense cloud of smoke to cover them. This cloud of smoke is so dense that it's impossible to see through and see if anyone's inside of it. The only people who can see through it are Glaz, people using bulletproof cameras, the Maestro turrets, and supposedly the rumored Season 2 Defender for Year 4, who apparently has thermal sight. But everyone else can't see through it at all. And pings don't work through smoke. If you ping a smoke cloud, the ping will just float in the air. Even when you have the thermal activated, the ping won't go through. It'll still float in the air just like the other ones. Because of this, it makes great cover for attackers trying to push into site or trying to plant. Each attacker that has access to smoke only gets 2 smoke grenades. And since there's not that many operators that have access to them, they can be a bit of a rare commodity. When thrown, smoke grenades last for about 13 seconds, which makes them perfect for trying to plant a diffuser in the bomb game mode. This gives the attackers plenty of time to take advantage of the smoke. Now for you newer players, it's important to note that these smoke grenades won't emit smoke immediately after landing. Once you throw a smoke grenade and it lands on a surface, it takes about 3 seconds to start up the smoke. So don't throw smoke and immediately peek expecting to be covered. Wait for it to actually detonate and then peek through. I know a lot of people might laugh at this and say, I can't believe that has to be said, but I've seen in the lower ranks it does need to be said. Now that's it for the basic information. Let's go into who has it. Smoke grenades are available on only 7 attacking operators out of the 23. These operators are Montagna, Glaz, Fuse, Blitz, Jackal, Dokkaebi, and Gridlock. Now I personally use smoke grenades on all of these operators except for Fuse. The main reason being that since smoke grenades are fairly rare, you should try to take advantage of them and use them on every operator that you can. And all the operators that I show as using them on are operators that are very, very common in bomb. So a smoke grenade just works super well with them. Personally, I would argue that smoke grenades are one of the most important secondary gadgets to bring. This is primarily because of the bomb game mode, which is probably the most popular game mode because of all the tryhards in the game. It's almost essential when you're trying to go for a plant with a diffuser while defenders are still on site. It's not going to be that easy to just walk into site with no smoke and try to plant a diffuser while the defenders are standing right next to you. With smoke cover, the cloud is not too big, but big enough that a hunched over body is kind of hard to see or hit in there. So the general strategy is push close to sight, smoke it out so that the defenders can't see where you're planting, have someone push in and plant, and then back away and cover. And then depending on whether you have a glass or not, deploy more smoke so the defenders can't see you at all and glass can still see them. It can also be important to bring multiple smokes when trying to go for a plant on bomb. The main reason being echo. Echo can stop one of the attackers from planting and can do so multiple times because of his 2 drones with 2 blasts each. So for bomb, if you're trying to go for planting the diffuser, that takes 4 seconds to plant, and a smoke grenade only lasts 13 seconds. So if an echo is good, and you don't push in immediately after your smoke, he can hit you twice with a disorientation, and your smoke will wear out before you can try to plant for a 3rd time. So because of this, you generally want to bring more than just 1 pair of smokes. And this is not necessarily just to counter echo, this can also be used to counter other operators, such as smoke, any operator with a C4 or maestro. You can use the smoke to bait out their resources, and then once the defenders are out of resources, then you smoke again and plant without them being able to do anything about it. The most common thing to do is to try to bait out a C4. You throw the smoke down, start planting, as soon as you hear that C4 Velcro rip, you run away. Generally it wastes one of your smokes, but you've wasted one of their C4s. You throw down another smoke, and then you try to plant, and they can't do anything about it. Now when using smokes in a plant like this, it's also important to be wary of Jaeger. Since Jaeger has 3 ADSs, each of them absorbing 2 grenades, he can easily counter your smokes. And because generally a team will only have either 2 or 4 smoke grenades, you don't want to waste any on a Jaeger ADS. So you want to make sure to destroy them or have another operator burn them, which we'll get into in the next section with flash grenades. But you want to make sure that there's nothing stopping you from using your smoke grenades. And if you use them properly, it should be fairly simple to get a plant down on almost any site. And that's about it for the main uses of smoke grenades. There are other things I could talk about, like using it to make a small cover when you're rotating around, but that's more situational. This is the main primary use of smoke grenades, is trying to set up a plant on bomb. The only other piece of information I'll give you before I go into the next section is it's important to note that smoke grenades do not stack. Throwing 1 smoke grenade in one spot or throwing 4 smoke grenades in one spot are exactly the same. They won't last longer because you have multiple down. They won't be a thicker smoke because it's already opaque, you can't see through it. So the density of the smoke is the exact same. Even glass can see through 2 smokes at the same time. So don't spam smoke grenades on the same spot. If you're going to use more than 1, make sure to spread them out. Otherwise you're just wasting them. The third secondary gadget we're going to talk about is flash grenades, or flashbangs, or stun grenades. They have a couple different names, but I'll probably just call them flashbangs. They're another throwable that's given to attackers that can either blind or deafen defenders, as well as attackers, but allow attackers to push in more securely. Now the effect the flash grenade has is completely dependent on how close it is to the defender and also whether they're looking directly at the grenade or not. If the flash grenade lands immediately next to a defender, the blinding will last for about 5 seconds, while on the outer limits it'll be as short as about 1 second. Now I mentioned earlier that the effect a flashbang has is dependent on whether you're looking directly at it or not. This is only the case for when it's farther than 4 meters away from you. If it's at 3 meters or closer, it'll have the same effect whether you're looking at it or not. However, if it's 4 meters or farther away, it won't flash you if you're not looking at it, but it'll still deafen you for about 5 seconds. And honestly, that deafen can still be pretty impactful. It makes it really hard for the defender to hear an attacker pushing them or hear what's going on. And one thing that's important to note is that being inside or outside of a building has absolutely no effect on the durations or values of a flashbang as far as I can tell. So defenders are not more at risk of being blinded than attackers simply because they're inside. However, the consistency of a flashbang is much worse inside because of the amount of clutter maps have. If the flashbang's behind a small box, sometimes it'll disorient a defender, sometimes it won't. They're one of the most inconsistent gadgets in the game, and it can make it fairly frustrating to use. But if it's used properly and not inconsistently, it's amazing. Attackers who have access to flashbangs get 3 of each of them, which is the most out of any of the grenade throwables that attackers have. Now let's move on to who has them and who I use them on. There are 12 total attackers who have access to flash grenades, and this includes Sledge, Ash, Thermite, Montagna, Buck, Blackbeard, Capitao, Hibana, Dokkaebi, Lion, Maverick, and Nomad. And then I bring flash grenades on Ash, Thermite, Blackbeard, Capitao, Hibana, Lion, Maverick, and Nomad. Now we talked about how close you have to be if you have to be looking at it, stuff like that. But unfortunately for the most part, the main use of flash grenades is just to burn ADSs on Jaeger. Since your smoke grenades and frag grenades are much more valuable, you don't want to lose those to an ADS from Jaeger. So instead, most attackers will just throw all 3 flashbangs in a window where an ADS is next to it and just burn the ADS. This will allow your attacker friends to throw in a frag grenade or a smoke grenade to get a plant down or get a kill, and then unfortunately you'll be out of flash grenades. And this isn't just for smoke and frag grenades, it's also for other gadgets. This can go for Ying Candelas, Fused Cluster Charges, Ash Charges, Zofia Charges, or Grismots. So it is fairly important for an attacker to burn an ADS using his flash grenades, but it can sting a little to waste so many of them. And then one last tip before we move on to the next section. Just like smoke grenades, flash grenades do not stack. So don't throw all 3 of them at someone expecting them to be blind forever, like it's going to stack 5, 5, 5. The flashes are always going to go for their full duration regardless of whether other flashes are thrown or not. So if you throw one, wait 2 seconds, throw another one, the person's going to be blind for about 7 seconds. And then if you throw one and then throw another one a second later, it'll be 6 seconds. So it's not going to be 10 seconds just because you threw 2 flash grenades. It's just going to reset their blindness and then go for the 5 seconds after. But that'll be it for flash grenades. Now let's talk about the most rare grenade out of all of them, frag grenades. These are easily the most sought after secondary gadget on attack. They've been shuffled around from operator to operator and are deemed incredibly powerful, and are usually a huge indication of whether an operator is picked or not. As a matter of fact, IQ lost them in a recent patch not too long ago because she was deemed too powerful with them. So frag grenades are a huge buff for any operator to get. And because of this, only 3 operators own them in the game, bringing 2 frag grenades each. These 3 operators are Buck, Sledge, and Finka, and personally I bring frag grenades on all of them. Like I said, frag grenades are incredibly rare, so you should be using them on every operator that you can. There's only one reason I would ever say not to bring frag grenades, and that's if you're so bad that you're consistently killing yourself or your teammates with them, you should not bring them. But if you aren't that bad, then otherwise always bring them. They can be used as distraction, flushing people out of cover, securing kills, or just outright killing people. Now let's get into one of the more advanced pieces of information for grenades, whether it will kill someone or not. While frags seem like they'll always be lethal, there's actually a few reasons why they won't kill someone. If a player has rook armor on, it doesn't matter how close the grenade is to them, it'll always down them. If the player is overhealed by a Doc Stim pistol, they'll be downed as well. Or just survive the grenade entirely. And of course this depends on how much the overheal is, how much health they have when they get hit by the grenade, etc. Frag grenades within 2 meters do 142 damage on 1 armor operators, 120 damage on 2 armor operators, and 105 damage on 3 armor operators. And 3 armor operators are the only operators in the game that can take a grenade in close proximity and be downed without needing rook armor or overheals. Since the grenade does 105 damage and each operator has 100 health, plus 20 down but not out health, it would leave them in the down but not out state with 15 down but not out health, if that makes sense to you guys. So as a 3 armor on site, you never have to worry about grenades outright killing you, as long as you have full health, or at least close to. Now because of all of this health calculations and also damage drop off from a distance, unfortunately frag grenades can lose about half of their utility. What this means is that in a lot of cases, frag grenades are just going to down an operator and not outright kill them, which means you'll have to use a second frag grenade to kill them. So you lose half of your utility. But any day of the week, I would rather use 2 frag grenades to get a kill for sure than not. So using 2 frags isn't the worst situation, but it does kind of sting. Now out of the 3 frag wielding operators, Sledge and Buck are used much more than Finka. Now because Buck and Sledge are vertical destruction operators, you'll probably be using your grenades in such a way as well. You'll find yourself using grenades vertically to get kills, throwing them through the floor to get them onto site, whether from above or below. This can be very useful for situations where it's impossible for you to get an angle with your gun, so you can just bounce a grenade in and kill them. Now since you'll be throwing grenades in vertically to get kills, it's important to know how much to cook them, and also how to get optimal bounces with your grenades. Frags are incredibly consistent, which means they'll always bounce the same way each and every time. Use this to your advantage and learn their bounce and trajectory. The last piece of information I'll give you for frags is their cooking time. It takes 4 seconds for a frag to fully cook and explode in your hand. So try not to hold it any longer than that. But let's move on to the last section. Now the last section for today, last gadget, breaching charges. Breaching charges are available on 14 operators, making them the most popular secondary gadget, with each operator who gets them having 3 in their possession. They can be placed on any unreinforced or soft wall/floor, and they can be detonated one by one and open a good deal of a floor or wall, more so than a sledgehammer, and almost the same as a thermite exothermic charge. Now these 14 operators who have breaching charges are as follows: Thatcher, Ash, Twitch, Fuse, Blitz, IQ, Blackbeard, Hibana, Jackal, Ying, Zofia, Finka, Nomad, and Gridlock. Now, out of all these 14 operators, I only use breaching charges on one of them, Fuse. The reason why I use breaching charges on Fuse is because of how well they combo with his gadget. Generally, you want to be using cluster charges from above the site, so you can put down a cluster charge and a breaching charge, set them off back to back, and then while the cluster charge is going off, creating mayhem, you can see them through the hole in the floor and shoot them through the breaching charge hole. So it combos fairly well. Now for the rest of the operators, there's really no point in bringing them. One operator I could maybe advocate for would be Ying, because you can use a breaching charge comboed with her Candela to hot breach a room. You put the Candela down on the barricade, put down a breaching charge, hot breach in, and the people are blind while you're pushing. Unfortunately, it's fairly simple to counter a hot breach because it's very easy to hear someone placing the breaching charge on the window. So while you're trying to set that up, they can easily just shoot you through the barricade and kill you. So overall, breaching charges are not that good to use. Now because they aren't that good to use, they did receive a lot of changes recently that made them somewhat more viable, but still arguably the least picked secondary gadget on attack. These changes include a much faster deployment time to allow attackers to be not as vulnerable while deploying it. One of the issues before was if you wanted to put it on a window or a door, they could easily shoot your feet or shoot you through the barricade and kill you while you were doing so. Another change that was added was the damage that the breach charge can do. Before it used to do lethal damage on both sides if you were close enough. Now breaching charges have been changed so that they only do lethal damage on the opposite side of where you're placing it, so the defender side, and on the attacker side it'll do much less damage. On the attacker side it now does 40/50/60 damage depending on your armor value, and still does lethal damage on the defender side when you're close enough. And there was one more change to breaching charge that as far as I'm aware was completely undocumented, but most people know about now, and that is that breaching charges now have a disorientation-like effect. It's not quite like an echo drone, it's not quite like a Grismop, but it still disorients you if you're within the damaging range of a breaching charge. Now that we've covered all the changes that happened to it, let's get into why breaching charges aren't that viable. It's really just one simple reason. It's that attackers already have a huge amount of soft destruction in terms of primary gadgets. You have Sledge, Buck, Ash, Sophia, Jackal with his secondary shotgun. These are 5 operators that are run in almost every single attacking round that have soft destruction. They can break floors, walls, castle barricades, or hatches if need be. And since they're so common, you generally don't need to run more people to do what they already do as their primary gadget. Bringing breaching charges on attack can be a pretty significant waste, when instead these operators could be bringing flash grenades, smoke grenades, or claymores to help the team. So because of this, overall breaching charges are not that viable. The only time to really bring them is, like I said, if you're trying to combo it with your gadget, or if there's no one else on your team that's bringing soft destruction. And unfortunately, there's no huge advanced interactions that breaching charges have to make them more of a viable pick. They just aren't that good. But before we move on to the quiz portion of this video, I'm going to give you guys one tip for breaching charges. This will help more the new players than the more veteran players. On the breaching charges, there is a little light that indicates what you're trying to breach. If you hold the breaching charge in the air or over a hard surface, it's going to have a red light, meaning that the surface is unbreakable and you can't use your breaching charge there. If you hover over a completely destructible wall, the light will be green. So it's good to use that to tell whether a wall will actually be fully breakable and you can walk through it after you've breached it. And then if the light is yellow, that means it's not fully destructible, but you can still destroy it. What this means is if you put it on a wall and it's yellow, you'll be able to blow off all the drywall, but the metal bars will still stay there. So that can be helpful for the new players trying to figure out what to breach and how breachable something is. And now one last thing before we get into the quiz section. Here is a quick summary of all of the gadgets in the game with which operators have them. And then here is the version which shows which operators I recommend bringing the gadgets on. So as you can see, majority of the operators are recommended to bring flashbangs, and the least recommended gadget overall is the breaching charge, with the other ones lying in between. But now let's get into the actual quiz. And now that'll conclude the information segment of this video. We're now going to move on to the quiz section, which, if you haven't watched the Siege School episode before, basically I will ask you a few questions, give you about 10 seconds on the clock to come up with an answer, and then I'll give you my answer. If your answer is correct or close enough, you give yourself a point. And at the end of the quiz, I'll give you scores based on how many questions you got right. Now let's get into the actual questions. We're going to have one question for each of the gadgets I talked about. So question 1, this one will be about claymores. How big of a hole is needed in a wall for the claymore laser to go through? With 10 seconds on the clock, go. Time's up. The answer is as small as a bullet hole. For most claymores I put down, I will punch a hole in the wall just because it makes it easier for the laser to go through uninhibited, but you can make a hole as small as a bullet hole for the laser to go through if you hit it properly. So if you're super advanced and want to do this trick, it can be even harder for the defenders to see it. Because if a defender's pushing up a staircase and they see a punch hole in a wall, they might be more wary. But if all they see is a little tiny bullet hole, they're not even going to notice that, and you can easily kill them with a claymore. Question 2 is about flash grenades. Can flashbangs explode mid-air/throw? So if you throw it straight up in the air, can it explode mid-air, or will it wait until it impacts the ground and then explode? With 10 seconds on the clock, go. Time's up. And the answer is yes. It'll take about 3 seconds before they explode in the air. Now this can be a little weird because you'd assume that if it explodes in 3 seconds that it will always explode in 3 seconds even if you throw it into a room, but that's not the case. If you throw it somewhere and it bounces off a surface, it'll explode a second after the impact. So the flash essentially has a 3-second fuse if it doesn't hit anything, and it has a 1-second fuse after hitting something. Question 3 is about frag grenades. How many times will the reticle flash before a frag grenade explodes in your hands? With 10 seconds on the clock, go. Time's up, and the answer is 13. This was really hard to count because some of the reticle flashes are as short as like 3 frames long. This was fairly hard to count because some of the reticle flashes are as short as like 5 frames long, so most people won't actually notice it on their monitor. But when you play it back, you can actually count out 13 different flashes. Anything past 8 flashes, though, means the grenade will probably explode fairly close to you. Question 4 is for breaching charges. We talked about how breaching charges now have a concussion-like effect when the breaching charge goes off. So the question is, does this concussion effect go away the same way as echo disorientation? And what that means for those who don't know, when echo drone disorients you, if you keep moving, the disorientation will last much longer. However, if you sit still, it'll go away a lot faster. So to reiterate, does the breaching charge disorientation duration get affected by movement? With 10 seconds on the clock, go. Time's up, and the answer is no. Whether you move or sit still, the disorientation lasts the same, about 5 seconds. Question 5 for smoke grenades. This is in the same vein as the flash grenade one. Can smoke grenades explode mid-air? With 10 seconds on the clock, go. Time's up. And the answer is, surprisingly, yes. This is actually something I did not know about until I tested it for this question. Overall, I was like, there's no way. I never have ever seen a smoke grenade explode in the air. They have to land somewhere and then they'll detonate. But the answer is no. You can throw it straight up in the air and the smoke will just sit there floating, which could make for some really cool glass effects where you throw a smoke grenade super high up in the air, have it explode midair, and then just look through the smoke. But obviously it's not practical. And for those wondering, it takes about 3 seconds before the smoke grenade will detonate in the air. So about the same as a flash grenade. Now we do have a 6th question. This is a general one, including all 5 gadgets. Which of these 5 gadgets was not available during the launch of the game, and only came in after the fact with one of the new seasons? With 10 seconds on the clock, go. Time's up. And the answer is the claymore. Claymores were introduced in September 2016 in a big update during Operation Skullrain. They are since the only new attacker gadget to be added, and I don't think they're going to be adding any new ones anytime soon. Now we have one last bonus question. Question number 7. Who is the only male 3 armor attacker to have both smoke grenades and breaching charges as their secondary gadgets? With 10 seconds on the clock, go. Time's up. And the answer is Fuse. And just like Fuse is the only 3 armor male attacker to have both smoke grenades and breaching charges, Fuse is also the only attacking operator available on my merch so far. This new design goes up on sale today and is available for the foreseeable future, so ignore on the page how it says shirts only available for 3 days or whatever. That just means it prints every 3 days. But if you do want to support the channel and get some good merch while doing so, make sure to check out the link down below and buy the shirt. Thank you to everyone who does buy it. It means a lot to me, and thank you for supporting the channel. Now that that plug's done, here are the scores based on how many questions you got right in the quiz. Let me know in the comments down below how many questions you got right, because I did try to make this one pretty challenging, and I want to know if I actually succeeded in that. But that will conclude today's episode of Siege School. Just one more plug before I go. Another good way to help support the channel is by subscribing on Twitch. You can do so by either giving $5 or using Twitch Prime to sub for free. Both help support the channel equally, so go check out the Twitch page and make sure to sub there. Well, that's it for my plugs, and that's it for the video. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next episode of Siege School. Take care.